I never told my son the truth about my income, about the life I built when no one was watching. To him, I was just another ordinary mom who left early, came home late, and lived quietly. But the night he invited me to a formal dinner with his in-laws, I decided to let the world believe I was someone else. Someone fragile, someone poor, someone invisible. In that choice changed everything. It started with a phone call on a Wednesday afternoon. Marcus sounded stiff, like he was choosing his words with tweezers. Mom, Simon's parents are flying in this weekend. They want to meet you. We're having dinner Saturday night. Please, just be there. I could hear that nervous crack in his voice, the same tone he used as a kid when he broke something and didn't want to admit it. I asked, "What did you tell them about me?" There was a pause long enough to feel like a confession. Then he said quietly, "I told them you work in an office. You live simply. You don't have much. Not you're hardworking. Not you raised me alone. Just simple. A word people only use when they don't want to say poor." My heart didn't break, but it did tighten, the way old scars remind you they're still there. I had spent decades building a career that required steel nerves negotiating contracts worth more than some people's houses. But at home, I lived quietly on purpose. I never flashed money, never talked about my income, never bought anything I didn't actually need. Marcus didn't know because I didn't want him to grow up spoiled. I wanted him to understand value, not luxury, but I realized at that moment, he didn't just think I was humble. He thought I was less, and his wife's parents, I already had a feeling about them. The type who measure worth by handbags, watches, pedigree. So I made a decision that even surprised me. If they expected a struggling, worn-down woman, then I would give them exactly that. Not to mock them, not to play a game, but to watch. To see their true colors with my own eyes before revealing anything of who I truly was. Saturday came. I put on the worst dress I owned, boxy, faded, shapeless. The kind of outfit nobody remembers. I pulled my hair into a loose, messy bun, wore shoes with worn edges, and carried an old canvas tote bag instead of a purse. Looking in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. Perfect. Exactly the woman they assumed I was. When the taxi dropped, me at the upscale restaurant, one with polished glass walls and a valet in a suit that probably cost more than my entire outfit, I felt a strange mix of amusement and dread. Would they treat me with kindness? Or would they show the ugly side I suspected? The moment I stepped inside, I had my answer. Marcus looked at me as if I'd shown up wearing a costume. Simon's expression was a flash of embarrassment she tried to hide. And her parents, the polished, glittering couple already seated, looked at me like they were reading a price tag. They didn't see a mother. They saw a number. A low one. And they had no idea what was coming, because in just a few minutes before the appetizers even arrived, Simon's mother made a comment once so cutting, so arrogant it set the entire disaster in motion. You won't believe what she said. The moment I took my seat at the far end of the table, the one they subtly angled away from the center, Simone's mother, Veronica, lifted her eyes and scanned me from head to toe. And I mean, scanned. Slowly, judgmentally, like she was appraising a dented thrift store item someone accidentally placed in a luxury boutique. Then she gave a tight smile. The kind polished women use when they don't want to show their real reaction. "Oh," she said lightly. "You made it. Not nice to meet you, not so glad you came, just oh." I nodded politely. "Thank you for inviting me." She tilted her head, almost pitying. "Of course. Family should always be included. Even when circumstances are different." Different. A word that held a whole suitcase of meaning. Before I could respond, the waiter handed us menus, thick leather-bound ones with gold embossing. Every dish was described in French, which worked perfectly for my naive, struggling mother act. I pretended to squint at it, turning the pages slowly, like someone overwhelmed. Veronica noticed immediately. She leaned toward me, dripping with false concern. "Do you need a little help, dear? These menus can be complicated if you're not used to this kind of dining." I looked up with my best innocent smile. "Yes, please." I don't know what these words mean. Her eyes sparkled finally, something she understood. Superiority. She waved her manicured hand and said to the waiter, "Just bring her something simple. Something affordable." Marcus flinched. Simone's fork froze midair. Even Franklin raised an eyebrow. But Veronica? She acted like she was doing me a favor. She continued, "These restaurants can be quite expensive. But don't worry, we'll choose modestly for her." Her tone made it sound like she was adopting a stray cat. I kept my smile gentle and quiet. Inside, however, something cold settled into place. A calm, icy kind of anger. Not loud. Not explosive, just steady. The kind of anger that waits as the waiter left. Franklin joined the conversation, clearly enjoying the stage his wife set. "So, Alara," he began, pronouncing my name wrong, by the way. "I hear you work in an office? Administrative stuff, right?" I nodded. "Yes, paperwork and filing. A little bit of everything." "That's nice," he said in the tone people use for children's art projects. "Honest work. Nothing fancy." Veronica added, "It must be hard living on a small salary. But you manage, right?" "I do," I said softly. "I live within my means." She smiled sympathetically, as if I were a charity case. "That's admirable. Not everyone can live so." Simply. Marcus inhaled sharply. Simone stared hard at her plate. I just sipped my water. Then Veronica delivered the line that set the entire night's disaster into motion. "You know," she said with a dramatic sigh, "we've always done everything we could to give Simone the best education, travel, comfort. We believe children deserve lives better than their parents. Don't you agree?" The implication hit the table like a dropped knife. "Your son would have had better. If he hadn't come from you." I smiled politely. "Yes, every parent gives what they can." "Oh, of course," she replied brightly. "Some can give more. Some less. And that's okay." The arrogance. The absolute certainty she was above me. It was almost breathtaking. She didn't know who she was talking to. Not yet, because minutes later Veronica crossed a line so boldly, so intentionally that even her husband winced. And that was the moment I knew. I wasn't leaving this restaurant without flipping their entire world upside down. Dinner continued with Veronica casually sprinkling tiny insults across the table like powdered sugar soft. Sweet-looking, but meant to sting. She talked about their hotel, their rental car, the designer boutique where she bought a belt that cost more than my son's monthly rent, all while watching me, waiting for the look of awe she thought she deserved. But I kept my expression mild and quiet, leaning into the role of the humble, financially struggling mother. Then the food arrived, tiny plates with artistic swirls of sauce. Veronica cut her $90 filet mignon with slow elegance, then said loudly, "This cut is from a ranch in Northern California. You can't get quality like this in budget places." She didn't say places people like you eat, but she didn't have to. I simply nodded. "I'm sure it's wonderful." Maybe that bothered her, my lack of reaction. Maybe she wanted more power. Maybe she wanted me to feel small. But the next thing she said, that was intentional. Sharp. Calculated. She dabbed her lips with her napkin and asked Marcus, "So, son, does your mother live alone?" I felt Marcus stiffen beside her. "Yes, she does." Veronica put on her pity smile, the one she had perfected. "It must be hard," she said softly, but loud enough for the entire row of tables to hear. "Being her age, living alone, without a partner or steady support." My jaw didn't move, but my chest tightened. She kept going, and on a small salary too. "Marcus, darling, have you ever looked into, what do they call them? Income assistance programs for seniors? There are some wonderful low-cost housing communities for people like her." Marcus's eyes went wide. Simone actually whispered, "Mom." Even Franklin slowly turned his head, as if thinking, did she really just say that? I kept my voice steady. "I manage fine, Veronica. Truly." She leaned forward, lowering her voice dramatically, pretending to confide, pretending to care. Alara, dear, you don't have to pretend. We're family now. If you ever need help, just say so. I smiled politely. I appreciate your concern. She reached across the table and touched my hand like she was comforting a sick patient. We know life has been difficult for you. And that was it. That was the moment I knew without question that she wasn't just condescending. She wasn't just arrogant. No. She was someone who enjoyed the power imbalance. Someone who needed people to feel beneath her. Someone who believed money made her better, smarter, more deserving. Inside me, something sharpened. Not anger. Not rage. Something cooler. Clarity. If she wanted to see the poor, struggling mother, I'd let her. If she wanted to play queen, I'd let her wear the crown. But the kingdom she thought she ruled? She was about to lose it. Because she wasn't done humiliating me yet. Not even close. After dessert arrived, she asked a question so bold, so openly insulting, it almost made Marcus stand up from the table. Because the next thing Veronica asked me wasn't just a jab. It was a slap in the face, and it forced me to decide whether to stay silent or strike back. Dessert had just been served, delicate. Little creations with edible flowers and gold flakes, when Veronica finally asked the question she had been tiptoeing toward. Since the moment I walked in, the one meant to slice. The one meant to expose. The one meant to put me in my place. She lifted her fork, tapped it gently on her plate, and with a perfectly casual smile said, "So, Alara, what exactly were you able to contribute when Marcus and Simone got married?" The table went silent. Simone looked like she wanted to crawl under the tablecloth. Marcus slowly turned his head toward his mother-in-law as if he couldn't believe she went there. But Veronica? She was calm. Too calm. This was intentional. I kept my voice soft, steady. I gave them what I could. A small gift. Her smile widened. Victorious. Double quotes. Oh, how sweet. Every little bit counts, right? The condescension in her tone was thick enough to cut with a butter knife. She wasn't asking to learn. She was asking to highlight the gap between us. To remind me and everyone else how much she had given. And she wasn't done. She took a dainty sip of wine before continuing. You know, Franklin and I helped quite a bit with the down payment. $40,000, actually. And, of course, we paid for their honeymoon 3 weeks in Europe. But we don't do it to show off. We do it because we believe parents should support their children when they can. My spoon touched the plate. Slowly. Veronica kept watching me with the smug smile of someone who thought she had already won. Then she tilted her head and added softly, "Did you ever think of saving a little more so you could help Marcus the same way? I imagine things must have been tight for you." Simone yelled, "Mom! Stop!" But she didn't. "Oh, sweetheart, I'm not criticizing. I'm simply saying some people have more opportunities. And some have less. It's just the way life works." Franklin cleared his throat uncomfortably. Marcus's jaw clenched. Me. I stayed silent for a full 3 seconds. Then I smiled, small, polite, almost grateful. "It's true," I said quietly. "I couldn't offer what you did." Veronica nodded. "Please. Double quotes. Yes. But that's okay. Marcus doesn't need luxury from both sides. That would be unrealistic." The woman had absolutely no idea she was lighting a fuse. Then, as if her previous daggers weren't enough, she leaned closer and lowered her voice. "Anyway, we were actually hoping to discuss something important with you. Something that might help, considering your situation. Situation. As if I had a condition. As if being poor was a medical diagnosis. I folded my napkin neatly. "Of course," I said. "What is it?" Veronica smiled warmly, falsely, and took my hand again. "Well, Franklin and I thought we might be able to give you a small monthly allowance. Nothing huge, but enough to relieve Marcus from worrying about you." Simone gasped. Marcus actually whispered, "Oh my God." And Veronica just sat there smiling proudly. thinking she had done something generous. It wasn't generosity. It was an attempt to buy me off. To pay me to disappear. To remove the embarrassment from their family picture. I felt the last thread snap inside me quietly. Cleanly. The part of me that had planned to stay silent died right there at that table. Because the moment Veronica offered me a monthly allowance to stay out of my son's life, I decided the game was over. Now it was my turn to speak. And I wasn't going to whisper. For a few seconds after Veronica's allowance offer, no one breathed. Even the restaurant noise seemed to fade. Like the whole room paused to watch what would happen next. Veronica sat proudly with her hands folded, convinced she had just made a generous world-class offer. Franklin nodded, supporting her. Simone looked mortified. Marcus was frozen, caught between fury and disbelief. And me, I felt calm. Calmer than I had felt all night. Because her offer didn't hurt me. It clarified everything. It told me exactly who she thought I was. Exactly what she believed my worth to be. Exactly how low she valued me. So I lifted my glass of water, took one slow sip, placed it back down, and smiled. A monthly allowance, I repeated softly. How thoughtful. Veronica lit up. I knew you'd understand. We just want Marcus and Simone to have space. Without extra pressures or responsibilities. You know, your situation is delicate. Delicate. There it was. The word people use when they think you're pitiful. I leaned forward just slightly. May I ask something? I said with a calm sweetness that made Veronica relax. Of course, she said, delighted to continue. How much were you thinking? She blinked. Well, we discussed between $500 and $700. Just enough to help you live comfortably without being a burden. Marcus's head snapped toward her. Mom is not a burden. But Veronica lifted her hand dismissively. Marcus, darling, we're having an adult conversation. My son closed his eyes in frustration. I nodded thoughtfully. I see. So, around $700 a month. To stay out of Marcus's way. Simone dropped her fork. Franklin stiffened. Veronica kept smiling. Not to stay out of his way. Just to give them independence. Young couples need privacy. And you want to make sure I don't interfere, I added gently. Well, she smoothed her napkin. In a manner of speaking, yes. The calm inside me shifted. It didn't turn into anger. It turned into clarity, sharp, steady, unwavering. I leaned back, lifted my chin slightly, and spoke in a voice that was no longer timid. That's a very generous offer, Veronica. Truly. But before I consider it, I just have a few questions. Franklin narrowed his eyes. Simone stared at me with a mix of fear and relief. Veronica smiled politely. Go ahead. I folded my hands neatly on the table. You mentioned you gave Marcus and Simone $40,000 for their down payment. That's a lot, she nodded proudly. Yes, we believe in supporting our children. And their honeymoon, I added. 15,000? Correct, she said, straightening. So altogether you've invested $55,000 in them. Yes, she said. Exactly. I nodded slowly, letting the silence stretch just long enough. And that amount bought you what, exactly? Her smile faded. What do you mean? Respect? I asked. Influence? Obedience? She blinked fast, trying to recover. I don't understand the question. You do, I said softly. You've been measuring everyone's worth by money all night. Her mouth opened, then closed. Franklin frowned. What are you implying? I turned my eyes to him. That buying control is not the same as earning respect. The table went absolutely still. I could feel Veronica shrink just a little for the first time, because what I said next, it didn't just wipe that smug smile off Veronica's face. It shattered the entire illusion she believed she had over this family. Veronica stared at me, her confidence wavering for the first time all evening. That proud tilt of her chin dipped just slightly. Enough for me to know she finally realized I wasn't the fragile, needy woman she thought I was, but she still tried to recover. Alara, she said in a brittle voice, I don't measure people by money. I simply believe in helping where help is needed. I smiled gently. Oh, I agree. Helping is beautiful. But expecting compliance in exchange for help? That's something else. Her eyes flashed up. Franklin leaned forward. Are you accusing us of something? I shook my head slowly. I'm just making observations. Simone covered her mouth with her napkin, trying to hide the awkward tension. Marcus looked relieved, like someone finally said what he never dared to. I continued calmly. You've been very generous to Marcus and Simone. But generosity isn't real if it becomes a leash. Veronica snapped. I don't use money as a leash. I tilted my head. No? Then why does every single thing you purchased tonight come with a reminder? Why does every gift you gave your daughter come with a price tag attached to your approval? There it was. The flicker of truth she didn't want seen. Franklin interjected sharply. You don't know us. No, I don't, I said, meeting his eyes evenly. But I know behavior. And I know when someone believes they're above another person. Veronica scoffed. And what makes you think you're above us? I smiled softly. I don't. But I also don't place myself beneath you. She froze. The words hit harder than a shout. Then she crossed her arms, leaning back as if regaining her footing. You seem very confident for someone who struggles. Ah, there was the truth again. Her favorite word, struggles? I repeated gently. Veronica, I didn't say I struggled. You assumed I did. Well, she huffed. Your clothes, your purse, your situation looked quite obvious. I laughed under my breath just once. And that's the problem. You believe someone's worth can be read off their clothing. She stiffened. I looked at her outfit, her designer silk blouse, her diamond pendant, her polished manicure. You walked in tonight wearing money, I continued. I walked in wearing silence. And you decided silence meant weakness. Simone whispered, Oh my God. Under her breath, Veronica's voice went shrill. If you didn't want us to think you were poor, why dress like that? I leaned forward slightly, my voice quiet but steady, because I wanted to see if you'd treat me the same way. You treat people you think can give you nothing. Her entire face drained of color. Franklin exhaled, suddenly realizing the trap they'd stepped into. I continued, my voice steady and sharp. And tonight you showed me exactly who you are. Every assumption you made, every insult hidden behind a smile, every attempt to belittle me, was based on nothing more than fabric and guesswork. Veronica swallowed hard. Her mask, her expensive, polished mask, was cracking and she knew it. So now, I said, folding my hands neatly, let me ask you something in return. She clenched her jaw. What? If I told you I wasn't who you think I am, would it change the way you speak to me? Silence. Absolute silence. Because she knew the answer. And she knew I knew it too. Because what I revealed next didn't just change the tone of the night. It changed everything Veronica believed about me and left her speechless for the first time in years. The table was silent. The tension so thick you could slice it like steak. Veronica stared at me, blinking fast, trying to read my face. Trying to decide whether I was bluffing. Trying to understand what she had missed. I could practically hear her thoughts. What does she mean she's not who I think she is? Is she pretending? Exaggerating? Testing me? But the most important thought she had, the one flickering behind her eyes, was, what if she's actually someone important? I let the moment breathe. Let her stew in uncertainty. Let her replay every insult she'd thrown my way. Then I said calmly, You assumed a lot about me tonight. But you never asked about my life, my work, my background. Veronica stiffened. Well, Marcus said you worked in an office. I do, I replied. But you never asked what kind of office. Franklin narrowed his eyes suspiciously. What kind of office? I smiled politely. A corporate one. Veronica scoffed. Plenty of people work in corporate buildings filing papers. Yes, I said, nodding. But not everyone negotiates contracts, manages financial accounts, or oversees teams. Her brows shot up. You oversee teams? Several, I said simply. Franklin leaned forward. What exactly do you do? I reached for my water slowly, deliberately letting the suspense hang. I manage financing and acquisitions for a private firm. Veronica blinked. Acquisitions? Like business acquisitions? Yes, she swallowed. How big is the firm? I held her gaze. Large enough that I oversee portfolios worth more than the down payment you bragged about. Veronica's lips parted, but no sound came out. Simone covered her mouth, eyes wide, as if she suddenly realized she had drastically misread the entire situation. Marcus looked at me with shock, not because he doubted me, but because he finally understood how wrong he'd been in assuming he knew everything about my life. Veronica finally managed. Well, why would your son say you didn't earn much? Why hide it? I smiled gently. Because I raised him to value people, not money. And I wanted him to grow into a man who treated others with respect regardless of wealth. Her silence spoke volumes. I continued, and I chose to keep my life quiet, simple. You see a woman in a modest dress. But you don't know that I could buy this entire restaurant if I wanted to. Her jaw literally dropped. Franklin's eyebrows shot up to his hairline. I leaned closer, my voice soft but sharp as glass. You made assumptions based on fabric, not facts. On appearance, not character. And tonight, your assumptions guided every word you spoke to me. Veronica whispered, Why come looking like that? Because I wanted to see who you really were before I revealed who I was. And there it was. The truth she couldn't argue with. The truth she had forced me to speak. She inhaled shakily. So, how much do you actually make? Enough, I said, that I don't need a $700 allowance from anyone. Simone let out a tiny, involuntary laugh. Franklin's posture straightened, suddenly respectful. And Veronica? She shrank in her seat, realizing the one thing she couldn't stand. She had misjudged a woman she thought she was superior to, because just when Veronica thought she had heard the worst of her own mistakes, I told her the real truth about my financial life, and the room went completely still. Veronica sat frozen, her perfect posture collapsing inch by inch as she tried to make sense of everything I just said. The confident, polished woman who strutted into the restaurant earlier was suddenly nowhere to be found. Franklin cleared his throat, trying to recover the situation for both of them. So, you work in acquisitions. That's a broad term. What exactly does that entail? I folded my napkin neatly, taking my time before responding. It means, I said softly, I handle the buying, selling, and expansion of companies. Real companies. Ones that gross in the millions. Franklin blinked. Hard. Even he didn't have a comeback ready for that. Veronica leaned in slightly, voice trembling just enough to reveal the crack in her confidence. What kind of salary does that come with? I didn't flinch. Comfortable? Then I added deliberately, very comfortable. Simone exhaled like she had been holding her breath the entire night. Marcus stared at me with disbelief and pride. Pride that had been buried under assumptions for years. But Veronica wasn't satisfied. No, she needed a number-proof something to make the new reality fit inside her worldview. So, what? You make 6 figures? I met her eyes. No, I make 7. Her fork slipped from her fingers and clattered onto her plate. Franklin's mouth actually fell open. Simone's hand flew to her chest. Marcus whispered, Mom, why didn't you ever tell me? I looked at my son gently. Because money was never the thing I wanted you to value. And I wanted you to build your life on your own strength, your own choices, not my safety net. Veronica still stared, stunned. You make 7 figures? Yes, I confirmed. And have for several years. She inhaled sharply, struggling to maintain composure. So you're wealthy. I'm stable, I corrected. Wealthy is your word, not mine. Franklin leaned back, shaking his head slowly. All this time, Marcus told us you lived simply. I did, I said. I still do. Money doesn't require noise. Some of us prefer to live without broadcasting it. Then I added the part that truly shook them. And the house Marcus grew up in? I bought it outright before he was 10. No mortgage. No debt. Every investment I made went straight to his education, his stability, and his future. Veronica looked like she had swallowed air the wrong way. But then why? Why dress like that tonight? I smiled, kind but firm. To see who you were. Not who you pretended to be. She stared at me with a mixture of embarrassment, disbelief, and something unfamiliar. Something she rarely showed. Kalan humility. Her voice dropped. I misjudged you. Yes, I said softly. You did. Simone reached across the table and touched her mother's arm. Mom? You judged her before you even knew her. Veronica didn't respond. She couldn't. The image she created in her head, the poor fragile mother, had vanished. And in its place stood a woman she couldn't condescend to, couldn't belittle, couldn't pity. A woman she had tried to buy off for $700. I let the silence settle before saying, and there's one more thing you should know. Veronica looked up warily. What? What else? Because the next truth I revealed didn't just shock Veronica, it completely shattered her idea of control, status, and superiority, and changed the entire direction of the night. Veronica stared at me like she was waiting for a punchline, hoping the revelation I was about to give would somehow be mild, manageable, something she could swallow without choking on her pride. It wasn't. I folded my hands calmly on the table, my voice steady and almost gentle. The company I work for, I don't just manage acquisitions for them. Veronica blinked. Franklin leaned forward slightly. I continued. I own a percentage of it. The reaction was instant. Franklin's hand twitched. Simone's jaw fell open. Marcus muttered, You what? But Veronica. Her lips parted, but no sound came out, as if someone had unplugged her ability to speak. I let the moment land before clarifying. I'm a minority owner. Over the years, my work earned me equity. Not in stocks. In the company itself. Franklin whispered, almost involuntarily. That means you're far beyond wealthy. I didn't respond to the word. Wealth was never the point. I've always lived quietly, I said. Intentionally. I don't need estates or flashy cars or designer labels. I need peace. And I worked hard to build a life that gave my son stability without spoiling him. Veronica's breath came out shaky. So you have substantial money. I have security, I corrected. And freedom. And choices. She swallowed. For the first time all evening, she wasn't performing. She wasn't bragging. She wasn't looking down on anyone. She was simply stunned. Franklin cleared his throat. Marcus never mentioned any of this. I smiled softly. He didn't know. I chose to keep my professional life separate from home. I didn't want him growing up feeling pressure to measure up. Marcus rubbed his forehead. Mom, I can't believe this. I placed a hand on his. You were raised to value people, not money. And that's what matters. Simone looked conflicted, part shocked, part relieved, part embarrassed for her mother. She finally turned to Veronica and whispered, You judged her. For nothing. Veronica flinched. I didn't mean. I stopped her gently. You judged because you assumed. And you assumed because you thought wealth equals worth. Her eyes lowered. I've spent my life meeting people like you, I continued. People who believe kindness flows upward but arrogance always flows down. She winced. I softened my tone not to comfort her, but to deliver clarity with compassion. Do you want to know the real reason I never flashed my success? She looked up quietly. Why? Because I never wanted to become the kind of person who would treat someone the way you treated me tonight. That landed like a stone dropped into a still pond. Ripples spread across the table in silence. In shame, in realization. Franklin exhaled slowly. His ego deflating in real time. Simone reached for Marcus's hand. guilt and gratitude mixing in her eyes. And Veronica. For the first time since I arrived, she looked genuinely small. Not because of money. Not because of status, because she understood exactly what she had done, and exactly who she had done it to. Her voice was barely a whisper. What? What else should I know? I looked her straight in the eyes. But your money never impressed me. But your behavior did. She flinched again. And what matters now, I continued, is what you do next. Because what Veronica did next was something no one expected, not even me. And it changed the entire direction of the night. For a long, heavy moment, Veronica didn't move. Her fingers clenched the edge of her napkin, knuckles going pale. Eyes fixed on the tablecloth as if she were trying to gather the courage to breathe. The woman who lived her life on stages, at charity galas, at country clubs, in boardrooms where she bragged about her daughter, suddenly couldn't even lift her head. And then she did something I never thought I would witness. She stood up, not abruptly. Not dramatically. Slowly. Carefully. As if the act itself cost her something. Enormous. The restaurant fell quieter around us as diners noticed the movement. She placed both hands on the table, leaned forward slightly, and whispered, I'm ashamed. Franklin snapped his head toward her. Veronica. She held up her hand, not to silence him cruelly, but to steady herself. No, she said. Please, let me say this. She turned her eyes to me, and they were wet. Not theatrical tears. Not manipulation. Real. I misjudged you, she said, voice trembling. Terribly, and unfairly. I didn't speak. I didn't rescue her. I let her sit with the weight of her own words. She swallowed hard. I shouldn't have treated you the way I did. I shouldn't have assumed things about you. Or your life. Or your value. Her voice cracked. I don't know what came over me. Pride, habit, insecurity, all of it. Simone looked shocked. As if she had never seen her mother humble herself before anyone. Franklin watched with a face torn between discomfort and reluctant admiration. Marcus looked at me with something deeper. Gratitude that didn't need words. Veronica continued. Her voice soft but sincere. You raised a wonderful son. A man I'm proud to have as part of our family. And I treated the person who raised him with disrespect. That's unforgivable. I nodded gently, but said nothing, waiting for her to finish. I can make excuses, she whispered. But the truth is, I judged you because I believed I was above you. Finally, the truth laid bare. And the worst part, she said, blinking away tears, is that I judged you on all the wrong things. Clothes, purses, appearances, things that don't matter. She took a breath, shaky and small. I'm sorry. The simple phrase, 2 words she probably hadn't said in years, felt like a tremor rolling through the table. I am truly, deeply sorry, she repeated. Not because of who you turned out to be, but because of who I chose to be tonight. That hit harder than any confession. Simone reached for her mother's hand. Mom, thank you. Franklin cleared his throat. I'm impressed, he admitted quietly. It takes courage to say that. But Veronica wasn't done. She turned to me again. Her voice steadier now. Her spine straighter. If you're willing, I'd like to start over properly, with dignity. With respect. As equals. I didn't nod. I didn't smile. I simply studied her face, really looked at her, and saw the truth there. She meant it. The arrogance was gone. The superiority was gone. The need to dominate the room was gone. What remained was a woman who had finally been confronted with the mirror she never wanted to see, and chose to step toward it instead of away. I exhaled softly. Veronica, I said, starting over as possible. But it begins with honesty going both ways. She nodded quickly. Yes, anything. What else do you need from me? Because what I asked next wasn't revenge. It was a test. And whether Veronica passed or failed would determine the future of our family. Veronica sat with her spine straight, her hands trembling slightly on the table. She had apologized, genuinely, humbly, painfully. But apologies are easy when you're cornered. The real test is what comes after. So I looked her in the eyes and asked quietly, "Are you willing to treat me with the same respect? Even when you believe no one is watching?" The question hit her like a wave. She blinked, startled. "Of course," she said. "I mean it. I truly do." But I could tell she didn't fully understand the weight of what I was asking. She thought respect was a performance, something done in public, with an audience. I leaned forward slightly. "No, not in moments like these," I clarified. "Not at dinner tables. Not in front of your family. I'm asking about when it's just you. When no one is around to praise you for being polite." Veronica's breath caught. Simone watched her mother nervously. Franklin leaned back, arms crossed, evaluating. I continued, my voice calm. "Respect in private is the only respect that matters. Public respect is just reputation." Veronica closed her eyes briefly, absorbing the words. When she opened them again, they looked clearer, focused. "You're right," she said. And she meant it. Then she surprised me again. She placed both hands flat on the table, no trembling now, and said, "I will treat you with respect. Not because you're wealthy. Not because you revealed your status. But because I was wrong. And I don't want to be that kind of person anymore." For the first time, she didn't sound defensive or polished or practiced. She sounded human. I nodded once. "Good," I said. "But there's something else." Her shoulders tensed. Franklin sat up straighter. Marcus glanced between us like he was watching a chess match. I continued, "I need you to treat Marcus with respect too." Veronica froze. I studied her expression. The flicker of surprise in her eyes. She'd assumed this conversation was about me, about how she treated me. But she had never realized how her behavior affected her daughter's husband. And their marriage. "He deserves kindness," I said softly. "And support. Not pressure, not expectations, not subtle disapproval." Simone swallowed. "Mom, she's right." Veronica's eyes softened with guilt. "I know. And," I added, "you need to accept Simone and Marcus as adults. Their choices, their lifestyle, their independence. Even when they don't align with yours." Veronica hesitated, but only for a moment. Then she nodded. "You have my word." It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't embellished. It was simple. And it was real. I could tell the words cost her pride. Not money. Not power. Just ego. But losing ego isn't a loss, it's a transformation. I softened my tone. By tone, my tone. Offering a small smile. If we can build our relationship on honesty and mutual respect, I believe we can move forward. Veronica exhaled shakily. "I want that. More than you know." Simone reached for her mother's hand again, and this time Veronica didn't pull away. She squeezed her daughter's hand with the warmth she had withheld all night. Franklin nodded in approval. Finally relaxing. Marcus looked at me with gratitude, the kind of gratitude only a son can have when he realizes his mother not only defended herself, but defended him too. Then I said something gentle but decisive. "There's one final thing I need from you." Veronica inhaled sharply. "What is it?" Because the final request I made wasn't about money, status, or apology. It was about the one thing families break over and heal with. Veronica sat perfectly still, eyes locked on mine, waiting for whatever final thing I was about to request. She looked nervous, not because she feared I'd ask for something impossible, but because she feared I'd ask for something truthful. She wasn't wrong. I took a breath and spoke gently. "I need you to trust Marcus and Simone fully, without conditions." Veronica's lips parted slightly. Not anger. Not resistance. Just surprise. "Trust them." She echoed softly. "Yes," I said. "Not just when they're doing things your way. Not just when they're meeting your expectations. But when they're navigating life on their terms together." Simone squeezed her mother's hand, silently begging her to understand. Veronica looked between the two of them, her daughter and her son-in-law. And I saw something shift in her expression. A realization, subtle but powerful. She had never truly trusted them. She had tried to manage them, guide them, shape them, control them, but not trust. I've always tried to protect Simone, she whispered. And I suppose I assumed I knew what was best. I nodded softly. That's natural. But at some point, protection becomes interference, and guidance becomes pressure. Franklin let out a long sigh, not frustrated, but relieved that someone had finally said what he probably hadn't been brave enough to. Veronica pressed her lips together, then nodded. You're right, she said quietly. I have to trust them to build their own life. I offered a small smile. That's all I'm asking. She exhaled shakily. And you're right about something else too. I tilted my head. What's that? Her voice trembled again. I want to be better. Truly. Not just for my pride, but for my daughter. And for Marcus and... She paused, swallowing. For you. That last part surprised even me. Marcus looked emotional, his eyes softening as his mother-in-law finally stepped into humility. Simone reached across the table, tears forming in her eyes. Mom, that means everything. Veronica blinked back tears, clearing her throat. And if you'll allow me, I'd like to build a relationship with you. A real one. Not based on assumptions. Or appearances. Or status. I let her words settle. They weren't perfect, but they were honest, and honesty is the foundation families grow from. I nodded. I'd like that too. Relief washed over her face, the first genuine peace she'd felt all night. Franklin finally spoke. I think we all learned a lesson tonight, he said carefully. About humility. About judgment. About keeping our egos in check. Veronica shot him a look that said, You too, dear. And I almost laughed. The waiter approached timidly, sensing the air had shifted. Would you all like coffee? Or dessert to go? For the first time all evening, Veronica smiled. A real smile. Soft. Warm. Human. Coffee would be lovely, she said. For all of us. Marcus wrapped an arm around Simone. Simone leaned her head on his shoulder. Franklin relaxed into his chair. And for the first time since I walked into that elegant, polished restaurant, the tension dissolved. A new energy filled the space. Not wealth. Not status. Not pride. Connection. But just when the evening seemed ready to settle into forgiveness, something unexpected happened. The waiter returned with a small envelope. For you, ma'am, he said, handing it to me. I frowned slightly. For me? He nodded. It was dropped off earlier with your name on it. Veronica glanced at Franklin. Marcus leaned closer. I turned the envelope over and froze, because inside that envelope was something that would shift the entire night once more and reveal a truth none of them were prepared for. Everyone at the table leaned in as I held the small ivory envelope, my name written across the front in elegant handwriting I didn't immediately recognize. It wasn't from the restaurant. It wasn't from Marcus. And judging by the confused looks around me, it wasn't from anyone sitting at our table either. My pulse quickened not with fear, but with curiosity. I slid my finger under the seal and opened it. Inside was a single card. Thick, heavy, embossed. I read the first line silently, and the breath caught in my throat. Simone whispered, What is it? I turned the card so only I could see it, scanning the clean serif font. Congratulations. Your acquisition proposal has been approved. Final contracts will be delivered Monday. Wellsworth Capital. My heart dropped, not because I was surprised, but because of the timing of all nights. This news arrived tonight. Franklin noticed my expression. Alara, is everything okay? I exhaled slowly and lowered the card. Yes, I said softly. Everything is more than okay. Marcus leaned forward. Mom, what is it? I looked at him. My son, who had never asked for anything, never demanded a cent from me, and I felt a swell of pride. It's confirmation, I said gently. That I just finalized the largest deal of my career. Simone's eyes widened. Like, big? I nodded. Like, our firm now owns a controlling share in one of the country's fastest growing companies. Franklin stared at the card. Wellsworth Capital? He breathed. That's not small. That's major. Veronica covered her mouth. Oh my God. Marcus shook his head in disbelief. Mom! I can't even process this. I smiled warmly. It just means everything I've worked for, every quiet choice, every long night, every sacrifice finally paid off, and I'm grateful. Veronica stared at me, her eyes soft, humbled. You're extraordinary. I shook my head. No, I'm simply someone who learned not to underestimate people, because you never know who's sitting across from you. Her eyes filled with tears again. But this time, they weren't from guilt. They were from respect. Real, earned respect. Franklin lifted his glass. To Alara, he said softly. Not because of wealth, but because of dignity. Simone lifted hers next. To new beginnings. Marcus squeezed my hand. To my mom. The strongest person I know. Veronica hesitated, then raised her glass too. A small act, but one that meant far more than she realized. To humility, she whispered, and second chances. We clinked glasses gently, not loudly, not dramatically, but with meaning. And for the first time that evening, we were a family around that table, not two sides divided by wealth or appearances. Not a battle of egos or assumptions, just people. Flawed, learning, growing people. The envelope, unexpected as it was, didn't create division. It brought clarity. It closed the chapter on misunderstanding and opened the door to something genuine. As we finished coffee and gathered our things, Veronica stepped beside me near the exit. She didn't speak at first. Then quietly, with sincerity I never thought I'd hear from her, she said, "Thank you for giving me the chance to change." I smiled softly. Just keep choosing respect. That's all anyone ever needs. She nodded. I will. Outside, the night air was cool. City lights flickered like scattered stars. And as we all walked toward our cars together, not divided, I felt something rare. Peace. A night that began with assumptions, insults, and invisible walls ended with truth, humility, and real connection. Not because of money. Not because of power. But because honesty shared honestly builds what pride destroys. And sometimes, a single dinner can change an entire family. Asterisk if you enjoyed this story and want more emotional, real-life lessons wrapped in powerful storytelling, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Your support means the world, and it helps me keep bringing you more amazing stories every week. Make sure to hit the bell icon so you never miss an upload. Thank you for watching. Stay kind, stay curious, and I'll see you in the next story.